Hi everyone, welcome to another edit. Today I am going to be editing an image a lot of you have been asking about, or something similar. This image edit is going to be based off of one that was up in my gallery quite recently called Return to Mad World, where I created a really vibrant red and kind of purpley blue landscape around my model. So today I'm going to be doing a slightly different image from that edit, and I think we're going to have fun with it. So I'll get started. First I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustments, Shadows and Highlights. In Shadows and Highlights I'm going to go up to my Shadows bars, and the radius bar I'm going to pull all the way over to the edge because this seems to create much smoother shadows. So right about here, fairly close to the other side, I'm going to leave that. And I think I'm going to pull this one back down, fairly close to this edge, the amount. That seems pretty steady. So right now, this is the difference we're looking at. A lot more vibrancy and contrast, much more contrast. So also before I leave this, I think I'm going to pump this just a little bit and also move in a lot more color to work with in the image. So there we go. This is how the image started. This is where it's at. Alright, now that that's done, we're going to go up to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. Now in Hue and Saturation, I'm going to work with the master levels just because it'll create a much smoother color shift. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it right around here, I think. And you pump in a little extra contrast or saturation levels to it. Alright, now don't mind that the model has shifted in tone because now we're going to fix that. So that's where it started and that's where it's at now. So now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my history brush, which over here in my toolbar is already selected. So now that I have my history brush selected, I need to go over here to my history bar. Now since what I'm going to be doing is moving the model back to her original color. So to do that, I need to do select in the history brush section right here, select the movement before I shifted color, which was Hue and Saturation. So now I have the last effect, which was Shadows and Highlights selected, which is the most recent realistic color done to her. So one second, let me move back in that brush. Alright, so here I go at 100% opacity, and right now I have a brush selected with, I'd say, about 65% hardness. It's a good range. And I'm going to go in and just kind of slightly sloppily brush all over the model. It's one brush effect. So don't mind kind of going over the edges a little bit. This is just preparing for the next section. Now, if a lot of you probably use layers as a part of your workflow, and that's totally fine. I use my history brush quite frequently like layers. And that's just because that's what I'm more comfortable with when I'm doing my editing, but if you need to use layers, feel free to make yourself a layer and a mask to do this process with. Alright, so now I've got a sloppy selection of her, and now I'm going to go in and kind of fix up this selection. So now here at my history bar, I'm going to move it down my history brush to Hue and Saturation, which is our most modern color foliage change. Now I'm going to zoom in, nice and close, maybe a little out, and I'm going to use the brackets underneath my plus and minus keys to make that brush size smaller. With that brush size smaller, I'm going to go in and just very carefully work in the red foliage color with the history brush. So this is just to re-establish that background color. And now that we have a much closer selection to the model, it's a lot easier to do this. Now, the more time you spend on doing a nice clean selection, the better it's going to look in the end. Detail is definitely key. I'm probably going to speed this process up in the end so it goes kind of whizzes by, but feel free to pause the video, take your time, make your selection nice. Oops. Back we go. Make sure that these edges are very clean. Alright, that edge looks very clean, so I'll move down. Oops. Let me select my history brush here. The nice thing about zooming in is you get a nice clean selection when you work the details further zoomed in than you will if you work it further out. So even though I'm covering up the gravel path right here just for the sake of keeping things consistent, I'm actually going to be going back over this gravel path and removing a lot of this tone. But just for now, make a nice clean selection of the model. Now, a lot of you might want to just use a lasso, a selection of the model, and that's okay as long as you feel comfortable with that. I personally like the effect of going in and doing this hand-done detail work myself, and that's what I feel most comfortable with. It's whatever you're comfortable with to get the effect you're looking for. Always work with the brush size that is going to give you the best control. I usually have my finger just kind of above the bracket tools, ready to shift size anytime I need to. Now when I get to my hair here, it's going to be a little more complicated because hair is not always perfectly dense. You need to be very cautious about how you shift its colors. So I'm going to kind of get close to the hair, but I'm not going to touch it with this brush yet, and then I'm going to go back over it in a second and show you how I do that. Alright, now we are at the hair, so I'm going to show you guys how to take care of that now. So we still have our history brush selected, we still have our hue and saturation selected. Now we're going to go up to our opacity, and let's turn it down to about 18%. So with our opacity at 18%, maybe get about that size of brush, we're going to start kind of painting in around the hair so as not to create a very sharp brush against it. A little back there. And come in here. It's kind of a more painterly, soft look against the edge when you use a lower opacity. Alright, zoom out for a second. It looks like we have a fairly good selection there. Okay, so now we can move on. So the next step is to anchor this model into the background. Right now she's pretty alone in her color tones and it's a little unnerving. So to do that, I'm going to continue to use the history brush, but I'm going to move back up to my shadows and highlights. And I think I'm going to, I'm going to keep my opacity around, 18 to 20%. Get my brush size up. And the first thing I'm going to do is brush down this path that she's on, because that kind of anchors her into this environment, and the only thing we really want to be super bizarre and striking in this environment is the foliage. But by creating parts of the image that still continue to be what they originally were, it makes it a lot more striking and also believable. So I'm going to do the same thing to the trees, the trunks, kind of anchor them back into reality. You don't have to do this to all of them. Just kind of pick some items within the environment to make more realistic. Makes the fantasy color way more striking. Oops, too much right there. Make sure you avoid the foliage in most of this. Very carefully select this tree out into the path. This one in the foreground. Okay, so at this point it's looking pretty grounded now. You've got this color that's kind of matching up with the model a little bit, and the pathway that seems pretty relevant to her colors as well. And now we can start to play with the mood of the image. So to start that, I'm going to go down to Selective Color from Image Adjustments. And the first ones I'm going to play with are my neutral tones. So the whites, neutrals, and blacks, the basic colors of the image. So to start with the whites, I think I want to add a little atmosphere into this image. By adding a little bit of tones, especially magentas, into the whites, I'm kind of getting that red-rimmed look to the model, so she kind of makes sense in her environment. Now onto the neutrals. For the neutrals, I'm kind of thinking a bit starker look. Kind of add the blues in there. Maybe a little bit more magenta, just a tiny bit. And also a little bit of cyan. And in the blacks, I'm also going to add some more blue, magenta, and also more cyans. So far, just by adjusting those three, we've gone from here to here. Might just adjust that black down a little. So now I'm going to go on to the reds. And we certainly have a lot of red to adjust in this image. I'm going to add some more yellows, potentially. And magentas and reds to really make those vibrant. And the yellows, I'm adjusting mainly the model. I'm actually going to turn her yellows down a little bit. Add a little magenta in there. I think that's pretty good right there. Now the cyans, we have a lot of control because it's of her dress, and it's a very striking one-of-a-kind color in the image. So I'm going to take some of the yellows out of that to really blue it up. Maybe just a little bit of magentas and really pump the cyans in there. And I'm also going to do more when we move on to hue and saturation again. The only other thing we have is magentas. And for the most part, that is controlling a little bit of our shadows and red ranges. I'm going to turn the cyans up a little bit just to kind of anchor that color a little more. And I think at this point we are ready to move on. So again, we move from here to here. I click OK. And now on to hue and saturation. So I'm going to go directly to cyans. And I'm going to pump a little more of that in there to just really get that almost supernatural vibrant color from it, because I can. That really helps start to make the model stand out more. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to go back up to adjustments, and actually, hold on. I'm actually going to do a little bit of retouch now, just some simple work. Remove some spots. Because I remember down here I've got a little bit of splotching on my legs. We'll get these taken care of. Again, using the heel brush over here. When using the heel brush on an edge, like a leg right here, click about center with the line. And for the most part, you usually get a fairly clean look. There you go. Just removing a little bit of splotching, old scars. I think we're doing pretty good here. Oh, there's a couple of loose threads from the dress. I'll move one back. There we are. And I think now we can go up to the face, and I'm going to go down and grab my burn tool here. It's on, let's see, let's pop it onto shadows. Let's see, here we go. Got my shadow tool. I'm going to darken the lashes of both my eyes to kind of make them stand out a little more in the image. I also know that my irises are a little mellow in color, so I'm going to darken those up a little bit more to make them stand out. Oh, that's too much. And I'm also going to go up here to shadows and change it into mid-tones up here. And I'm going to just use that to increase and enhance the look of my eyebrows. Because I have very light colored eyebrows, and when the image is so far off, they become especially hard to see. And the last thing I'm going to do is go here to my lips. Let's kind of add a little more color depth to them. And one last thing I'm going to use to do that is my sponge tool. It's on the same list as your dodge and burn. I'm going to use Saturate Brown Flow 28. I'm going to go in, just kind of increase the color on these lips a little bit. It'll be hard to see from far away, but at least it'll add a little. So from the very start of that work, we started here, and now we have about that much definition. That's actually almost visible. So now we can do some contrasting work. And to start that, I'm going to go up and just check my brightness and contrast from Image Adjustments. Add just a little extra contrast. Maybe also a little extra brightness. So we started there, now we're here. And I'm also noticing that the sky's kind of bright, and I want to dim it a little. So I'm going to go up to Select, Color Range. And on the image, I'm going to click on the white of the sky and say OK. Now I have the sky selected. And now I'm going to go down here to my color palettes, and I'm going to select a mild blue tone. Now with that selected, I'm going to go up and select my gradient tool. I'm going to click at the top of the image and pull it down. That adds just a very slight tone to the sky. That adds a little more, and I think that's good. So I'm going to say good to that, and I'm going to go up to the lasso tool and right click to deselect. So now from there we started here, and now we're there. So it just adds a little bit more to the sky and makes the whites just a little less popping, which will help the model show up a little more. So now, one of the last things I'm going to do is go to my burn tool. I'm going to select midtones. I'm going to make my brush fairly large. With it fairly large, I'm going to start kind of circling the image. Got it at about exposure 8%. I'll make it a little smaller. Keep circling. I'm pretty happy with that. So before we started this burning, it looked like this. Now that very subtle vignette helps us focus in on the model in the center. I think I'm going to go up one last time to contrast. Just level in a little more. And one last finishing touch I'm going to do is just check color balance and see if I like it where it's at. I'm going to add just a little blue. Go over to my shadows. A little bit of that. I'm going to click OK. So we started there, and now we're here. One last thing I'm going to try is to go into Hue and Saturation and go to my cyans, or actually my blues, and just try and pull some of that color out. Now this is starting to give the trees kind of a more dead black burned look, and I'm kind of liking that. And last thing, I'm going to use my dodge tool now on midtones. Just go in, kind of brighten the model up a little more. Highlights, same thing. Actually, I'm going to pull out of that last one, make it a little more subtle. Alright. And last thing, and you may not have to do this, but I frequently do this because I have a fairly soft focus with my lenses. I'm going to go into Sharpen, Smart Sharpen in the filters, and I'm just kind of mess around. Let's say okay. And now I'm going to go to my history brush again. Click on the dodge right before my Smart Sharpen. Make the brush quite large. I'm going to use the history brush to push back in some of that soft focus, and I'm actually going to turn it up to 100%, or on the edges of the model, so that the model is more high focus than the rest of the scenery. Now I'm going to do one more thing, I think. I'm going to go in with blur, Gaussian blur, under filters again, make a slight Gaussian blur, and I'm going to go back up to the history brush right before the Gaussian blur, and then I'm going to bring the model in the center back into focus. And there we go. So before we started all that, we're here, and now it's a little more in focus. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that through the video, but it is definitely a little more focused. Alright, so the very start of this image was here, and now we are here. So I hope this helped you guys out a lot. It's a really fun look to play with, especially in outdoor scenes. And if you like it, subscribe, like, leave comments below. That's always awesome. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have a lot of fun with this effect.